Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, Red Pill Edition. My name is Leon Jones, and in this segment, I'm going to talk about the populace. And it's very important that you understand the topic. So, before I get into the video, let me give you the title. The title of today's video is Most of the Populace Doesn't Know American History. The majority of the populace doesn't know anything about American history. Now, when I talk about American history, we'll talk about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and I'm going to get more into the political realm. Now, shout out to Brother Reg, the bad guy. I was listening to one of his panels, and one of the reasons why I don't go on panels, particularly with African American males, is because a number of them are stuck in their feelings. Now, he had one guy on his show who was pro-Democrat. And when the other brothers were talking to him or asking him questions, he would get upset. He would get upset because he couldn't refute what they were saying. And that video that Brother Reg did was the Friday night marathon, whatever he calls it. But when it comes to politics, and I'm just using that as an example, and history, most of the populace doesn't read, or if they do read, they're going to read into something so they can back up their opinion. But when it comes to understanding establishments, you need to go back and look at history. Now, let's talk about the Social Security number. A number of us make the mistake when we give out our Social Security numbers. Now, somebody might ask me, what does this have to do with history? Well, a lot of what's going on is being tracked by your Social Security number. But a number of us don't understand that our Social Security number is not supposed to be used as identification. We have other forms of identification. So when somebody asks me for my Social Security number, I do not give them my Social Security number. I'll give them the number specified with that particular account. And what's going on when you give out your Social Security number, you have a number of individuals who are scammers out here. They're going to take that information from your Social Security number and sell it. This is why a number of us get all these robocalls. Because what's happening is you have the scammers out there looking to get into our bank accounts to take money away from us. Now, that's one aspect. Another aspect is when we talk about the Democratic and Republican parties. Now, one of the brothers on Reg's show said that the Republicans are the more racist party. Now, I'm not going to say that there aren't any racists in the Republican Party, because what happened in the 60s, the parties did switch. Some of the racist Republicans, some of the racist Democrats became Republicans. But make no bones about it, the Democratic Party is still the party of racism, except they do it a little differently now. They try to make Black people feel ignorant. They make Black people feel as we need to go to the liberal white people for help because we're victims. And if you look at some of the policies, most of the Black women, the liberal Black women, vote for socialist parties or socialist policies. Now, this is not a video about Black women, but I have to use this as an example because most of your liberal Black women are Gen Xers, down to your late baby boomers. These are the individuals who were told they had to go to college. And when they went to college, they were fed feminist nonsense. And now that a number of them have run for power, they're putting that feminist nonsense out there as policies. And now the brother on Reg's panel did say one thing that was right. Black men don't stick together. We don't run as a collective. But African American women, they only act as a collective when there's a benefit in there for them or when there's a man involved. But when it comes to history, many of us do not read into history. You have a number of these kids out here tearing down the statues, or they tore down a number of the statues, thinking that they're going to erase history. You're never going to erase history unless you burn all of the documentation. Now, when it comes to insurrection, many of us don't even know what real insurrection is. Now, insurrection comes from the Insurrection Act of 1807, which means you can bring in the military. Now, here's where the left in this country is hypocritical. When it came to the early 70s about the Capitol, I don't hear anybody in the mainstream media or the African American community talk about Weather Underground, Bill Ayers, or Saul Alinsky. Maybe Mr. Fantastic talks about this, but here on Black YouTube, you don't hear him talk about Weather Underground. But Weather Underground, featuring Bill Ayers, they went in there, tried to blow up the Capitol building in the early 70s. Now, if you don't know who Bill Ayers was, he's still living. He was a Chicago professor. But when it came to what happened at the Capitol last week, everybody is still blaming some of the supporters who were for Trump. Now, you had some Antifa members who integrated themselves into the Trump supporters to enter the Capitol. And let me tell you something else that's not heard. You had some of the police who let individuals into the Capitol building, or at least to the steps of the Capitol building, because they opened up the barriers. Many individuals don't see that. Now, what does all this have to do with history? All this has to do with history because in order to have a sovereign country, wars have taken place, particularly for freedom here in the United States. Now, I was born in Baltimore, and the big kahuna in Baltimore is Fort McHenry. Without that battle and that flag being there, Francis Scott Key wouldn't have written the Star-Spangled Banner. And we may have been taken over by the British. We may have been under a monarchy. You see, a number of us don't read too deeply into history. We have opinions. I have my own opinions. But for the most part, I get the facts by looking at who was before me and what happened. Now, it's very difficult to go back in time because I wasn't there. But many of us utilize institutions such as the media. And one must understand that the media should be the last resort because the media has an agenda. But when we look at history, going back to Bill Ayers and Weather Underground storming the Capitol, I don't hear anything about that. I don't hear anything about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Why? Because Antifa was funded by the Democratic Party. In fact, if you go on to the Antifa site, what comes up? You'll see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And something else you need to know. You hear the term German Shepherd. Minister Japp uses that term. Now, some people don't even know what that means. German Shepherd, of course, is a breed of dog. Now, that breed of dog was used in the 60s when black people were marching. This was for the civil rights marches. And when Brother Japp says African American women, I always put liberal African American women, they're out in front for white supremacist policies, he's right on that. Because if you look at the liberal black women, they're the most outspoken in the black community. Now, I know one brother on Reg's panel said, what do we need to know about abortion? Well, the more babies that are aborted, that means our population is going to continue to be stagnated. And when we can't grow as a community or as a race, we're going to eventually become extinct. And two reasons why the African American community can become extinct. Number one, the abortion rule, or the abortions that a number of African American women are having. And number two, number of black people want to marry interracially. But when it comes to the Constitution has been put in place so the government wouldn't have all that power. And right now, the government has too much power. When you hear people like AOC and Ayanna Pressley and Stacey Abrams, they want to have truth councils. This is why women shouldn't be running everything. Because a number of women who are in the Democratic Party, and you can thumb the video down, this is true, they want to use the infrastructure that men built to create a matriarchy. And if you look at the African American community, that matriarchy has been there for a long time. And it's going to continue to be there. Why? Because the Democrats have told a number of African American women that you can do everything on your own, and we're going to give you entitlements. You don't need the nuclear family. This is all history. And when it comes to African Americans, a number of us weren't even allowed to be educated in the past. You see, so when it comes to some socialism or tyranny, any African American that was educated was killed because African Americans were a threat. Now, let's talk about some other history. If you look at politics here, going back to the Democratic Party. In the 1800s, the Republican Party was established by black people and some white people. Well, black people started getting power in the South. Well, the Ku Klux Klan was formed by the Democratic Party to keep the Republican Party from getting power. You had the Ku Klux Klan at conventions utilize violence to intimidate blacks and whites who were Republicans. Most people believe that the Klan was there just for black people. No, the majority of black people were Republicans in the past. And if you look at the welfare state came into effect during Roosevelt's days. After the 1929 Depression, took a long time for the economy to come back. The income tax came into play during World War I. Now, see, I'm giving you all this history. And when it comes to civil rights, Martin Luther King even believed at the end that we should have fought for equality instead of integration. Because black people had more than just Black Wall Street. And when we were in position in the past to do for ourselves, we did. But it was jealous white folk who destroyed that. And see, when it came to marriage, here's some history. Black folk were married at a rate of 80%. Now we're not. And see, the 60s changed everything. Now again, this is not a video talking about black history. I'm just giving you some examples of history that have taken place because of what happened at the Capitol. Because when you look at the media, it's funny how the media did not condemn the Antifas and the Black Lives Matter all summer. Joe Biden didn't say anything about Antifa. But yet at Charlottesville, Joe Biden claims he had to run because Donald Trump said they were good people on both sides. But what he meant about that was this. There were people who agreed with keeping the statues up, and there were people who didn't. He was talking about those people. He did denounce white supremacy. And see, when you watch a lot of TV, individuals are only going to give you information that they want you to have. But in the meantime, what's always taking place is something that you don't know. Let me give you some other history. When it came to Obamacare, there was no Republican support for Obamacare. That was rammed through, and Nancy Pelosi said, you just have to read the bill. Well, she knew what she was doing. She knew that most people aren't going to read the bill. And when the bill came out, some of us had premiums that rose. The health care wasn't as good. But if you look at what went on at the Capitol, it's not going to surprise me that more of that's not going to happen. You don't want your government to have too much power. Because if you look at a lot of these other countries, when the government has all the power, the citizens are oppressed. Now, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you sit on. And when it comes to racism, the Democrats have already filled a number of people, or they've told a number of people that this country is still racist. Well, this country still has some people who are prejudiced. We all have a built-in bias. That's human nature. But the big problem when it comes to history with the left in this country is the left wants to go around the system to invoke their policies. And you want to know why they want to do that? Because most of us don't agree with their policies. They are totalitarian. And when your government starts getting too powerful, people are going to rise up. And again, when it comes to African Americans, I don't hear any African American talking about the Second Amendment. Most African Americans are still talking about magical stuff like church. Nobody's questioning this black pastor, especially you black men out there. Because you have people like Raphael Warnock, Senator of Georgia, who's supposed to be the head of a church, who is very radical. You had people like Reverend Wright. And when it comes to black people, it's a lot of your older black people in your 40s, 50s, and up who still believe in the Democratic policies. Well, the Democratic Party is really your racist party. What the Democrats do, they utilize victimization. And this has always happened. Because the Democrats really don't have any policies except for welfare state policies. And they create this divide between the people. The Democrats control the rhetoric by utilizing Marxist policies that come from college. They use the media, entertainers, and celebrities, and they use government. Now, although this country isn't socialist, what's happening is you have the big kahunas with social media. They want to control the speech. I mean, you look at social media outlets like Parler. Parler is no longer up because I was on Parler. But you still have Rumble and MeWe. And what's going on right now is some hypocrisy. And the hypocrisy is you have media conglomerates out here that are so big. How come they're not busting them up like they did the Bell Company when Reagan was president? Antitrust laws. In this country, you're not supposed to have monopolies. Why? Because monopolies basically bury competition. You look at AT&T. They tried to buy T-Mobile. That was rejected. But then T-Mobile came and they bought Sprint. And now T-Mobile is the second largest cellular company. But when it comes to history, the populists, they're distracted by what's on television, but they lack vision. And when I say lack vision, they don't really see what's going on. They're into their feelings. And I've always said feelings override critical thinking. Now, I've mentioned a lot about African Americans, but it's not all African Americans. I know that. You have white folk, you have a number of people who are consumed by social media every day. They believe that social media. They believe that mainstream media. They believe what they've been told at college. You see, all these institutions are really there not to teach you anything. They're there to indoctrinate you with the Marxist way of thinking. And many of us don't even know what Marxism and communism are because we've never lived in that type of country. But you have a number of people who are fleeing here from those countries. You think they want to go back to that style of government? No, because he had people like Pol Pot, Genghis Khan, Stalin, Lenin, Mao Zedong, Mussolini, Hitler. You even had Saddam Hussein. These individuals, they ruled with an iron fist. You didn't have any freedom in those countries. If you didn't do what they say, and you have China right now, you have communist Cuba. And when those people rule with an iron fist and you have no freedom, you get burned at the stake. In other words, you were murdered for going against the government. Now, they're trying to do that here. Now, when it comes to the United States, I don't care what side of the fence you live on. You should have a right to say what you're going to say. Now, people don't have to agree with your speech, but too often, and I've seen it for the past 20 years, that when you go against the left in this country, they're going to brand you something with an ism or IST, a racist, a homophobe. And they're always going to say, oh, this is racism, a xenophobe. And our leaders in this country, they're not men and women, they're children. If you look at Nancy Pelosi, even look at Mitch McConnell, they've been in politics way too long. And I believe it's something bigger out here. Because if you think about it, like on Brother Reg's show, going back to that conversation, the brothers were on opposite sides, but what they did not know is these Democrats and Republicans who are your elitists, they're all on the same side. And they're using diversion tactics to try to keep us divided. And see, when a country is divided, the establishment can go behind your back and put in policies that are going to oppress you. Because really, what we're going through in this country doesn't have anything to do with Biden or Trump. In fact, a lot of people who voted for Biden, that was an anti-Trump vote because they don't like Biden either. They want Kamala Harris to become president. And you know her record. She doesn't know anything about running the country. But you have people who have the same belief system as she. She was ranked the second or the third most liberal senator. That's dangerous. Because Biden, he said some crazy things. But he's pretty much moderate. Now, again, I told you, the wild card when it comes to the Senate is going to be Joe Manchin of West Virginia. And yes, there was a Republican who was arrested for being part of the insurgent that went on at the Capitol building. But there were also some Antifa, because there was one brother, Jonathan, I don't remember his last name, he was also arrested. But my question is, if you condemn one side, why not the other side? Because if you look at history, overall, governments have been corrupt all over this country. And the reason why this country wanted Trump out of power is because he didn't play the game. He knew what was going on. Because he actually fought for the people. Now, I'm not defending him, I'm just looking at policies. And when it comes to politics and history, most of us don't have a clue what's going on. We only believe what we've been told. And in the end, that's dangerous because when you keep a population uneducated and uninformed, you allow more totalitarianism to oppress a society. And right now, divide and conquering is working. But people need to wake up. Learn history. Get out of your feelings. Because in the end, oppression is going to kill us. Freedom is going to allow us to live longer. Because if you look at it, what's going on, these big corporations don't want small businesses or middle class. They want to control everything that we do. So in the end, you want freedom or do you want oppression? You be the judge. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talks On Radio Show right here on YouTube. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. And please like the videos and try to get my subscriber count up because I'm here teaching. And if you're looking for some STEM, something outside of politics news, check out the Mind is STEM channel. On that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where I talk about mechanical engineering and computer science. And if you want more of these hardcore topics, check me out on Blog Talk Radio. 215-335-7885 is the number. Can't find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio? Check me out on MeWe and Twitter. Because in the end, be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Again, please like the video. Please give this video thumbs up. What I'm doing is teaching. And again, shout out to Brother Ridge. Shout out to Minister Jap. Shout out to ABL, Mr. Fantastic, Will Johnson, United America First, Brother Brandon Tatum. Because in the end, let's preserve our freedom. And once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talks On Radio Show. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Please have a wonderful and gracious day. God bless you. I'm out.